Welcome back to League Unlock, you beautiful people. Eric and Mark here for some power rankings out of the land of Europia. And I'm just going to preface this by saying this EU was by far the hardest region to do power rankings here in Week 6 and kind of has been for the entire split, mainly because rankings 3 to basically 8, you could make an argument to basically put them in any order because these teams are so close right now.
This is like when you have that dinner meal and you're like, okay, this is okay. I've got my meat over here. You got some veggies and maybe some rice. And then something happens. You're not paying attention. And all of a sudden, everything's mixed together. And you can't tell.
You can't eat it.
You
can't
tell what's what at this point. And I can't tell you what is a rank 4 LEC team from a rank 8 LEC team. There's a lot of mixing up right there.
Give me an entire playoff bracket of just these 6 teams trying to qualify for the playoffs. But we got to start at the bottom, numbers 10 to 6, and we've got movement on the bottom for the first time in 2019 spring. Rogue is out of 10th place, Mark. They won the head-to-head matchup against Excel. They've won 2 out of their last 3 games. Here they come all the way up to number 9.
I don't think this is exactly the trend of Rogue
climbing.
Really turning around here, and this is the wild run to them winning the actual summer split here eventually. But I think this is a good positive turn here for this squad. They figured out a couple things here, and they've definitely got a little bit of momentum here rolling on their side, getting that 2 out of 3 victories here. And I think, again, as you said, getting a victory over Excel, take it for whatever you want and say, hey, you're not last place. That's worth something in my books.
No relegation, so that's always a positive. But the subs have worked for them. Expect a very different roster in 2018. And Schalke and Splice, in at 7 and 8, that's immediately where everyone will be losing their minds because they're 7 and 5. So how can they be that low? Well, Schalke, you remember, they were 7 and 1 a while ago, and now since then they have struggled. The only time they've gotten a win out of their last 5 games is against Rogue, and Splice have gone 2 and 2 over the last couple of weeks. Again, those 2 wins against Excel and Rogue. They have struggled against the more upper tier teams in EU, and especially in Week 6 when you had other teams like Fnatic who were ahead of them going 2 and 0. It's just hard to keep them in that top 6 because they've slowly been down on a downward trajectory the last couple of weeks.
Well, that's the thing here. This is a power rankings list, guys. This is where we're talking about the recency, the strength of the squad in the very moment. And Schalke, this was something that 2-3 weeks ago, yeah, of course, we were talking about them towards the very top, the LEC.
Right behind G2.
Right behind G2. People even wanted to see Schalke push into the top of the global power rankings over someone like an RNG. So this is really quite the fall from them, but this does dictate exactly what's gone on in those last 2-3 weeks here. We have not seen the same Schalke. We have not seen the same strength. We have not seen them play to what they need to get the job done in these games, to get the victories here, and they have to be falling in the power rankings all the way down to this spot.
And I know Fnatic going up to number 6 seems like too big of a jump, but they were 7th last week. We had them actually ahead of Misfits, even though, again, they had a worse record. They were already slowly starting their climb, and this was the biggest step of the entire season. It's not like they got wins against Excel and Rogue to go 2 and 0. It was Origin and Vitality. Origin were in the top 2 of our power rankings last week, and they completely destroyed them in that matchup. The Vitality one was definitely a much bigger toss-up and question mark in that matchup, but 2 and 0 is 2 and 0, and Fnatic finally looking like a team that should actually be in the playoffs.
The really great thing, the reason why I'm willing to say that I think that this Fnatic squad will make the full comeback journey to get into playoffs here, even with the rough start that they had, is that this week you saw Reckless and Nemesis take over certain games, certain parts here to get Fnatic leads, to get them the advantages, to get these victories here was fantastic from them, and they're going to need to have these type of performances now to make up ground here in the LEC. And hey, I've got enough faith in Reckless, and I've seen what Nemesis can do, and I know, hey, if Brox is hitting his smites and he's not letting Tom Kench hit it with his tongue, then that's no problem, and I got Fnatic making it to the playoffs again.
Right now, they look like, over the last couple of weeks, better than Schalke and Splice. And as we go into the top 5, I know Misfits is a team who the last couple of weeks were terrible. They looked awful, and now to have them go up a couple of spots, maybe even more than Fnatic. Again, it's a basic toss-up. You could maybe even put Misfits before Fnatic. I just feel like overall, even though they had a very close match against Origin that was very back and forth, it was super clean against SK, and just because of what we did see Misfits at times, we've seen their peak already, I feel like. That's been higher than Fnatic's, which is why they're one spot ahead of them.
I would agree with that the peak here for Misfits, but they're absolutely, if they're all working together and getting everything right here, I think that is right, that their potential would be higher than the likes of a Fnatic at this stage and point in their careers. But given what we've seen and what we saw this past weekend from Misfits, you gotta bump them right back up. This was a great bounce back week for them. They looked a lot better, a lot cleaner in their performance, and rotations around the map I thought were better. And I think that this is, again, an impact from here, from switching the coach back to Hussein Musfa. I think that getting Moose back in their coaching role there, he's gonna be a beast for this squad.
It might just be a comfort level for the team that they have someone that they can all kind of just listen to, and I don't know what the dynamic is behind the scenes with Jesus, but it seems definitely like the team looked a lot more comfortable, whether or not that has anything to do with the coaching. But I didn't expect them to go 2-0, but here they are back in the top 5. Top 4, again, it's been a lot of changing. Origin went 0-2 this week. They lost to Misfits and Fnatic, who both looked a lot better, so not too concerning of losses, I would say, for Origin, although they did get manhandled against Fnatic a little bit, but they're down a couple of spots. We were high and mighty on them after their upset against G2, but they fall down to that 4th spot. SK, after going 1-1, just managed to climb up. I still don't know what to think of SK. I'm telling you, man, that 3-8 is impossible to rank. You can have arguments left, right, and center, but what I can say is I think the top 2 is clearly defined in EU right now.
Well, hey, I got to give a shout out again to Selfmade on SK. Selfmade still
Rookie of the split.
Rookie of the split, doing everything he can to help that team get their victories here, and he's still performing at a very high level. But when you step up to being number 1, number 2 in the power rankings here in the LEC, you have to have Vitality in G2. Even with Vitality dropping a game against Fnatic here, I still got the faith in this squad being at least the 2nd best team here in the LEC.
Yeah, and Vitality really was one team fight away from winning that matchup against Fnatic. They looked pretty solid for the majority of the game, except for, again, a couple of those fights. But 3-8, we got to talk about it again. It's power rankings kind of going in to week 7. Who are going to be the strongest teams, and not, over the last couple of weeks is where this is fully going to be based on. And shocker, G2 in at number 1. We don't even really need to talk about them. They still have dropped the game, but they still are far and away the most dominant team, not just in EU, but in the entire Western scene right now.